Hi, everyone. Welcome to Wellbeing in the Time of COVID. We are going to start in about 1 minute. We'll just let folks arrive for another minute, and then we're going to go ahead and start.
This is normally where I sing. Keep people entertained during this time, but maybe I shouldn't do that.
What would you sing?
What would you sing? What would be the appropriate song right now?
The most appropriate song right now is, the COVID song is, "Don't Stand Too Close to Me."
Oh, that's good.
Don't hold my hand too much.
Right, I was actually, that takes me to the police. Don't stand.
Oh, right.
Right, yeah.
That's where
How does that not become like the anthem right now?
I think I've seen it in a few memes.
It would make sense. You know what? I'm sorry. What I meant to say is, how am I so out of touch that I haven't seen the memes that you're seeing? That's my question.
That is, what other songs would be? I keep going back to
far away. Doesn't. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Nothing. Alan's the singer in our group.
Clearly. Let me get my...
We're like the White Stripes, and you're Jack White, and I'm Meg.
Huh, thanks.
Sure.
That was different. No, I wasn't.
Haven't used that one before.
I feel like I'm always Meg.
I don't think so. If you want to be Meg, be whoever you want to be.
Really enjoying this.
Keep bantering. I need to log on my other computer here, so get another minute, folks, to arrive.
I am what I am. I am my own special creation. I've been thinking of that song a lot from La Caja Fall. The first song was from Oklahoma because I think COVID-19 has required a lot of I am what I am. Like whatever it is, wherever you are. That's it. That has been my song of COVID-19.
I appreciate that.
Right.
Yeah.
I thought that you were singing somewhere from West Side Story, the first one.
Huh. Yeah.
I never saw the new West Side Story.
Not many people did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, it closed way too soon. Yeah, I mean, think about all those shows right now that unfortunately, had closed or were just about to open. And one of Julian's best friends was gonna be in Carolina Chains, and closed right beforehand. It's such a bummer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Poor folks, whether you're on stage or backstage or whatever your role is in the theater, it's like so hard.
No, Disney decided they couldn't keep Frozen open anymore.
Yeah, saw that.
And my daughter's very good friend is young Anna, and she's devastated. That was her family. She felt so close, and it was so much a part of her self-esteem.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
What do you say?
So I think we can still see our welcome screen. Yes, sound good? And I found a way to look at my little script. So I'm going to introduce us now formally. So, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. So this session is being recorded right now. My name is Carolyn Cotillo, and on behalf of my team at NYU Alumni Relations, I want to thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Wellbeing in the Time of COVID, which is presented by the NYU Alumni Association and You Thrive Educational Services. So before we begin formally, please know that all of us at NYU hope that you and your family are safe and well in these unprecedented times. So in light of the current global crisis, we have fully moved all our programming online, and we're thankful that you've chosen to join us today to continue learning from the collective knowledge of our NYU community. The NYU Alumni Association represents nearly 600,000 alumni all over the world. On average, we host nearly 700 events annually to connect you with your alumni community and with NYU. Make sure to check the NYU Alumni website and social media platforms to keep up to date with all our events and programs. Today, I am extremely delighted to introduce our wonderful presenters. These two guys are co-instructors for NYU's most popular undergraduate course, The Science of Happiness. These guys and I go way back. Their course is phenomenally fun and engaging, and they are still so important in my life, inspiring me to increase my well-being weekly through their current online series, The Happiest Hour. So we have Dan Lerner, Master of Applied Positive Psychology.
Hello, everybody.
And Dr. Alan Schlechter, Director of Outpatient Child and Adolescent Psychiatry at Bellevue Hospital. And we also have my dear friend and our facilitator for this conversation, Shaquille Sinclair, their head teaching assistant for the Science of Happiness, also CAS class of 2017. So if you have questions during this session, please feel free to enter them in the question and answer box on your Zoom screen at any time. We will get to as many as we can during the conversation. So thank you again all for joining us. And let's take it away, Dan, Alan, and Shaquille.
All right, thank you so much, Carolyn. I really appreciate you having us here, and thank you everyone for joining us. You know, there used to be that everyone's busy. Now everyone has a lot of Zoom content they can check out. So thanks for making the time to have us today. Yeah. You know, so it's interesting that this Zoom format should be the format that we're all sharing right now. We were talking about this a little earlier about how we've gotten used to Zoom and how we've gotten used to talking about well-being on Zoom. And for Alan and myself, we've taught this course together for 8 years now, and it's all been in person, about 6,500 students now, I think, total. And yet we taught our first Zoom class ever about 2 months ago, and we thought it was really going to be kind of awkward. We figured, what are we going to do? People are coming in from around the world, different time zones. We're used to being super, interactive and engaging in the classroom, and really moving, not just lecturing to these 500 students, but really being able to share and hear them. And the moment we got on, we asked the very first question of the day. It was something like, has anyone here overcome a stressful situation recently? Bam, the text box blew up. You know, I have. And it's like, oh, this is really cool. And the next question being, who's willing to share it? I will. And then when we had someone unmute themselves and share it, the responses were really beautiful and lovely and supportive. And you know, that's wonderful. It's fantastic. And we realized very quickly that this format, which we were unfamiliar with and had clearly questions about, was actually quite accessible. It's why we ended up, you know, Carolyn, thank you for mentioning the Happiest Hour. The Happiest Hour is a video cast that we started producing about 6 weeks ago. We thought, wait, we have the opportunity to invite people from around the world, like experts and extraordinary writers and scientists, and then bring them to folks, and those folks can ask them questions live. So every Wednesday at 5 p.m., we do this Happiest Hour. Everyone from clinical psychologists, we have a neuroscientist, Heather Berlin, coming on this week. It means people can come on for an hour, be with each other, and also ask questions. And we have really a conversation with them. So that's what we're so excited about today, is we've had such great experience on Zoom thus far, being able to have this format and answer questions with people that we couldn't wait to get to folks who are NYU alums. And so again, that's a long way of saying thank you, and it's been working really well.
Yeah, it is always a pleasure to see you, Carolyn, and to get to work with you.
Thank you. The pleasure is mine.
No, yeah, Shaquille, do you notice that Alan left me and you out of that?
Yeah, it kind of hurt, honestly. We want to let us go.
This is off to a good start.
Yeah.
Good start.
Well, thank you both for being here. I think what's super compelling about working with you and being in your class is just sort of seeing your ability to really capture our cultural moment, kind of seeing what are our barriers to well-being and what are opportunities for well-being in the context of specifically college students there at NYU. And I think what people might be wondering, what I'm wondering as well, is what do you sort of notice currently in our COVID crisis time as being really unique barriers to well-being for people, as well as what are maybe some opportunities to engage well-being that folks might not be too aware of?
Sure. Alan, you want to jump in with those barriers?
I think even that statement alone is, I think, what Dan and I talk about the most, is that well-being is made up of both your ability to thrive and your ability to overcome challenges. A lot of the other, I'd say, people out there who talk about well-being, they're focused just on the well-being part. And, well, I should say the thriving part. And I think a big part of our class is that you really need to have tools for both. And this semester really was so fascinating with our students because you could really see it all in play. We were all doing it actively. And when I say everyone, that's all of our students, all of our TAs, and Dan and myself, because all of our lives have been just thrown up in the air. In our class, the topic of how you overcome challenges right now is pretty broad. I would say the one that connected with me the most was the idea of how to create realistic optimism at this point, which Dan and I, having a healthy sense of overestimating ourselves is really useful. Of being able to say, I can accomplish a little bit more than I think I can. I can do things. I think the future is going to be positive. Maintaining that in a realistic way right now has been really challenging because you don't know if what the news is telling you is correct. You don't know if what the government is telling you is correct. I mean, I'm a doctor. I'm working out of a hospital. There were times when what the hospital was saying was different than what the media was saying, was different than what the CDC was saying. And so I'd say the biggest challenge I've faced is finding the surest footing I can at a given moment. And I would say my way of doing that, I mean, a big component of our class is that everyone has to find their unique way of doing it. If anybody ever says to you, this is the way, you've got to meditate. Meditation's not for everybody. And no, you've got to be active. That's not for everybody either. Both of those things are big parts of my life. Although I don't know that one has saved me more than another. But I would say the idea that finding my footing for me right now has probably been through a combination of a little bit of control and whatever I can control, one of the C's I'm going to mention right now. So making time to meditate, exercise, do my sleep. Another C that I've been using a lot is coherence, control, coherence. So thinking about my story. What is my story during this? What is the story of my wife, my family, my kids? But then the most important C for me, by far, as Dan mentioned, is we got on that Zoom call that we were like, this is going to be weird. And then it was wonderful, is connectedness. I would say those 3 C's have been particularly essential for dealing with the challenges. But then I'm going to pass the ball back to Dan and think about thriving right now.
Well, it's funny, I love your question, Shaquille, because we teach this course called The Science of Happiness. We want to be very, very clear that it's not all about happiness. That when it comes to well-being, there are many facets to well-being. In addition to happiness, there are things like relationships and accomplishment and meaning and engagement. We'll talk about those in a second. But the barriers, during a time like COVID, are important to recognize. In our course, we also talk about stress. We talk about, psychological challenges. We talk about optimism and pessimism when it's healthy, when it's not, because we need both. So, the levels of stress that we're seeing right now, there are things that we've all experienced. The levels have gone up, though. Not only have they gone up, but they've changed. Right? So we were stressed out about one thing before. If you're a student, you're stressed out about grades. If you are a graduate, you might be stressed out about something that's family related or work related. And you still might be, but they're very different. And so that's one of the things that can be challenging is, wait a second, everything's different. Yeah, many, many things are different, but the fundamental aspects and fundamental challenges and opportunities, I would argue, remain the same. Stress is still stress, anxiety is still anxiety, so on and so forth. So being able to reframe those and go, okay, I'm dealing with stress a certain way is really important. Knowing it's there and acknowledging it is so totally key. But when it comes to the other side, and for folks out there who aren't as familiar with say positive psychology or or science of well-being, we tend to look at it as a kind of spectrum from -10 to +10. Traditionally oriented psychology deals with -10 to 0, right? Things you want to eliminate, right? When we get rid of those things that we're suffering from, we get to 0. Positive psychology, science of well-being moves beyond how do you nurture the pluses. And they can both operate at the same time. I'm stuck inside during a pandemic. Oh my gosh, I won the lottery. Things are really hard. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. It's not like it's one number and that's it. So when we think about opportunities for well-being, I think it's similar to say, yeah, we're stressed out in a different way. Our opportunities for well-being are still our opportunities for well-being. They just show up differently. So what I mentioned before, and this is the matrix that we use in our course. It comes from Dr. Martin Seligman, a mentor of mine at University of Pennsylvania, a father of positive psychology. It's called PERMA, the acronym. Positive emotion, E is for engagement, or when you get locked in, lose sense of time, get into the zone, be deeply immersed. Relationships is the R, positive relationships. The M is for meaning. We define it as something greater than ourselves, a connection, something greater than ourselves. And the A is achievement or accomplishment. And that can be anything from something huge, I got into college, to I got my checklist done today, did my laundry, did my shopping, hugged my kids. So everything is different there too, right? Because the positive relationships we might have experienced before, what we might have gotten at the office, or walking down the street, or seeing our friends at the gym, or going to a concert, those don't exist. But we still, as we think about each of those elements like buckets, the P, the E, the R, the M, the A, we still can figure out ways to put a little drop into our bucket. It might be virtually, like this. It might be appreciating the people who are, if we are with our families, we're lucky enough, or in some, most of the time, lucky enough, if we're lucky enough to be with other people or families, we have them with us. But if we're alone, how do we reach out and find people to fill that R bucket? Positive emotions or meaning might be very different. I used to get meaning out of my work when I go in and teach, or when I were able to see patients, or when I was able to work at a store and see people who came in every day and know I was helping them. It's very different now, but there's still opportunities for meaning. So I think the elements have remained pretty constant. It's how we see them and what we do to either deal with the challenges or take advantage of the opportunities that's changed so considerably.
Right. I think the word micro, I was using the word micro for the first month with everything. It was like finding your micro resilience, your micro meaning, your micro accomplishments, and even your micro relationships, finding, being able to look with a different pair of glasses to see these things. And then in that, there's been some beauty, of realizing how I can develop that well-being. It's going to sound sort of circular, but one of the major discoveries, and for me at least, in terms of research, is work done by Corey Keyes. And Dan was talking about all of that stress we're under, and even though we kind of separated into overcoming challenges and develop well-being, one of the ways we know that we are best capable of overcoming our challenges is when we're simultaneously elevating our well-being. So it's not a linear process. It's not just about overcoming your challenges, though you need some very specific skills for that. But the idea that all the time we can be looking at our P, our E, our R, our M, and our A, and working to elevate those. And then it turns out we're much more likely to overcome the challenges. And it can be forgotten. I mean, there have been days I've woken up and all I can think about is my stress and the things I haven't done, and the fact that I don't think my kids are necessarily as happy as they were 3 months ago. And where my mom's at, and she's by herself, and I can focus on the stress all day, but if I don't take that time out to focus even on the little accomplishments, I'm much less productive.
Yeah.
So right now I'm just putting in the chat for everybody to see PERMA and what that means, just as a recap. I know we're going through these concepts kind of quickly. Actually, I know you're so excited to share these things, but we had one person ask to slow down in this discussion.
Directed to me, I am sure, and Betsy, I will do exactly that.
Dan gets so excited and impassioned when he speaks. And anyway, in the chat is the acronym for PERMA, if folks were curious to review that. And again, if someone joined late, remember that you can click the Q&A box to have any question about well-being in the time of COVID talked about here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Carolyn. And I love what you both mentioned in terms of thinking of those micro moments and the smaller maybe aptitude or ability that we have right now to engage well-being. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more, maybe specifically about how to concretely think about reinventing the wheel a little bit during this time. I think of sort of my typical ways of engaging my well-being have to do with me walking a lot and me being outside and me engaging in large groups of people. And I've seen what I've been encouraged by is people kind of finding creative ways of engaging that now with our current context. And how do you imagine people getting into the mindset to think well about creatively reimagining the wheel right now?
Dan, after you.
Bye, thank you, sir. I think there are lots of different ways to do it. One way that I might encourage people is to have conversations with their friends and family. What are other people doing? You know, one of the challenges here is that being in an environment that doesn't change very much, like in your house, you know, not seeing many other people, means that you don't necessarily get that creative spark if you're used to having those conversations. And so often other people can inspire us. So, you know, the New York Times and Washington Post, those are the two papers I tend to read regularly. They have almost daily, at least they did for some time, have sort of tips. Here's some things that you might think about doing for your well-being. And it was interesting early on because I know that there was a conversation on about, well, is this really a time to think about well-being? It's actually a great time to think about well-being. Yes, you need to think about things that are challenging you. Yes, you need to be careful. And no, you can't be overly optimistic, you know, at least unrealistically. But it's a really good time to rethink your well-being. So yeah, I was on a call, for example, I was on a Zoom call with some clients last week, an organization that I work with, and there were about 15 people on the call. And they are all doing the same kind of work. They're in entertainment, and none of them are working right now. And one of the things that really struck me was that as people brought up ideas, often they would say, I know this sounds crazy, but, and then someone would say, actually, that's what I've been doing. Or they would say, that's a great idea, I'm gonna try that, and see them write something down. You know, so we have these ideas that because we're in the situation we're in, seem totally foreign. And in many cases they are, but it doesn't mean that they're not good ideas that can work. So I would begin with, what are the things that you found so far that are working for you? Are you keeping a journal more often than you were? Are you getting more sleep than you might have before, more consistently than you did? Are you out walking, like you said, Shaquille? And are you able to savor that? Is it about the meals that you have with people, right? And if you're not having them with people, you know, there's great data around folks who have meals, and I'm not saying from COVID, but from last 5 years, folks who have meals, even if they spend 5-10 minutes on a FaceTime or a Zoom call with someone as they're eating and share that meal, it actually has beneficial effects. So it doesn't need to be something huge. It can be, let's think of it like a step to the left. You know, you're having a meal, but you happen to be doing it on FaceTime. Your meaning might not come from your work. Your meaning might come from asking your neighbors, saying, I'm doing a grocery run. Can I pick anything up for you? I'll leave it at your front door. You know, how can I help my community in that way? What can I give back? That could be meaning instead of the work that I do. And my accomplishments, again, back to, especially here in New York, I think, but in our culture, are what's my huge achievement? Maybe it's getting up in the morning and saying, I'm gonna do my laundry. I'm gonna call three friends or 2 friends or 1 friend. And I'm also going to cook dinner tonight. So when we get to the end of the day, to go check, check, check. Oh, I've gotten these things done. It can be a huge help.
Yeah, and I actually have a list like that, like right here. I found that really helpful because I was starting to go a little crazy, you know, just like these endless days of sort of, you know, and I'm working from home, but on the weekend, sort of just like expanses of, and now what? So that's really helped me too.
So what are some things on your list, Carolyn? What are some things on your list out of curiosity?
Like, it's been getting outside, you know, and even when the weather wasn't as nice as it is right now, it was like, I'm still going outside, even if it's snow. It was snowing where I was actually in Pennsylvania. It's meditate for 20 minutes. It's this training for a program I'm volunteering with called Crisis Text Line that I've started up, because that is going to give me some sense of meaning and purpose right now. Exercise is on there, and call someone is on there most days. Those are some examples.
It's so they're not necessarily huge things. And that, you know, and here's the thing about that is everything I mentioned, not that it exists in a vacuum, but it doesn't necessarily take into circumstance. I just saw a question pop up in the Q&A, and I thought they can point Alan to that, which is basically saying, I take care of my toddler 24/7. I'm trying to work almost full time in a manager position that requires concentration. A child's very upset, acting out because she wants other kids. Understandably, doesn't say that, but she wants other kids, and she's an only child. So, Alan, I wonder if you can speak to what are the little things that we can do when we find ourselves in these circumstances too. They're challenging circumstances.
Well, you for the attendee who just sent this in, that is really complicated. And first of all, I am letting you know you are very much not alone. And there is no easy answer. There are a bunch of different things I want to respond to. One of them is, you know, Carolyn brought up her list. And for some people, they'll do what's on a list. Other people, they need to put it into their calendar. And when you're managing a kid right now, I've noticed my children are not very good at following my calendar. They don't often look at my list of the day or my calendar, and they're like, oh, this was mom or dad's time to do X, Y, and Z. And so I feel bad saying things like, finding just 20 minutes for yourself in a day might give you a sense of accomplishment that you're caring for yourself. Because I would say my ability to care for myself right now is limited. I work both in the hospital and I'm at home. But on the days when I'm at home, when I'm not working, doing telepsychiatry, I feel like I should be with my kids because my wife is totally overwhelmed and she needs a moment alone. And then on those days, I often don't make the time for myself. And it requires what sometimes feels almost like a little bit of selfishness, that I need to have the time for myself, that I need to schedule that in. I need to be like, from 2 to 2:30, this is what I'm doing. I am doing little things with my kids to give myself more time like that. My kids are doing the dishes now. Now they're 10 and 11, and you might have been like, my kids were doing the dishes when they were 6. Mine weren't. I must be just a coddling parent. But I decided during this period, I was like, kids, you gotta learn how to put the dishes in the sink. I'm not having them use the blender yet, but I'm having them make more of their food. And by the way, Jonathan Haidt has written extensively on this. When we give our kids things to do, it gives them responsibility. It makes them feel good. It adds to their accomplishment.
For the record, by the way, my kid is unloading the dishwasher today because Aaron and I beat him at poker last night, and that was the bet. Last place does dishwasher. So hey, he's learning the game and math, and I don't have to do the dishes today.
That's right.
Awesome.
That's right. But another part, that you can either call it can feel like selfishness at times, but I also want to say that you need a certain degree of bravery right now. Not just the bravery of dealing with COVID and all the things we have to do now, but I would say the character strength of bravery, of saying, I'm going to try something new. Carolyn decided that she was going to work on a crisis text hotline. And she said, I need to do those things that maybe I've wanted to do for a really long time. But she's created a lot of meaning and accomplishment, connectedness. A lot of things come from the things that you're doing, Carolyn, but it also required some bravery. Dan organized the Happiest Hour, and that's bravery too.
I would actually, if I can jump in for a second, if you don't mind, I would actually suggest that people get their character strengths, because one of the ways that we know best to nurture well-being, at least what the research is showing, is use of character strengths. If you go to www. It's letter V as in Victor, I as in imagine A as an apple, via institute. Someone can check this if you don't mind, Karen. Via institute.
Via character.org.
Yeah, I'm sorry, via character.org. You can take a free character assessment. And what that does is it allows us to find out what our signature strengths are, our character strengths are. We know that when college students incorporate one of their signature strengths, which is one of their top 3 to 5 strengths, into their goal setting, they're 50% more likely to realize that goal in the semester. We also know that when people incorporate and encourage to use character strengths in the workplace, that they have about a 75% chance of being engaged at work versus when they don't, when they have about a 9% chance of being engaged at work. So for folks out there who are trying to figure out whether you're taking care of a toddler, and that is an incredibly challenging thing, and figuring out the way to come at that, or if you're trying to figure out how to give back to a community like Carolyn is, to be able to look at your character strengths. Because bravery, if you see it through the lens of bravery, yes, it's much more engaging. If you see it through the lens of kindness, which is another character strength, and that's why you go to help, that will be more engaging for you. If you see it through the lens of justice or humor, because you're helping people bring some laughter, that's going to be more engaging. I would recommend that people go and check that out. It's free. It's incredibly helpful. Our students find it helpful, and there's a huge amount of research on it as well.
That's a wonderful suggestion, Dan. You know, I think that really gets to it and it really doesn't take, again, it takes about 20 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes to do the assessment. And that can seem like a lot. It's worth it. Yeah. It requires, your well-being requires effort and an investment of time. We have a question, does journaling help during times like these?
Right.
And you know, going back, I also sent out what the 3 C's are. The C of coherence, the idea of having a story, of understanding your story, is really essential right now. It's useful for meaning, self-esteem, and also in some ways of elevating your gratitude. But journaling, which has also been called kind of a poor person's therapist, it's very, there's a whole science of journaling, but there's really no bad journaling as far as I know.
I mean, I guess it would depend. I mean, if there's no bad journaling, there is some journaling that we at least we know has been shown to be particularly effective.
Yeah.
Right. So, for example, a gratitude journal is one of the more empirically sound ways that we know to raise our levels of well-being. So that is quite simple. Every night, you know, for those of us who don't journal regularly, to really to simplify and make it effective, that is every night you go and you write down 3 things that you're grateful for and why. I mean, and the why matters. Not just I'm grateful for the roof over my head, but because my dog, because my family, because my friends, because. And it can be 1 or 2 sentences each. Boom, boom, boom. What we're doing is not just reminding ourselves, but we find what happens over the course of about 30 days is that we first start scanning the world and seeing that there are things we're grateful for, basically rewiring our brain to see things that we're grateful for that we wouldn't see otherwise. And so to do that simple kind of journal has had a really strong effect when we look at the research. So journaling can be wonderful in many ways. We can also specifically target gratitude and I would say feel free to change that to what am I grateful for? What makes me happy today? You know, what is it that I need right now? Let me look to that and journal about that so I know that each night I'm going to be looking at that. And we have some other questions here too. I know that they're coming in here. I know Shaq, you have some as well. Anything popping up here for folks?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of our attendees is really interested in sort of, I guess, the E of PERMA, engagement. Seems to be having some trouble, and I know that it's pretty common right now, having trouble sort of engaging with different artistic or creative pursuits, given the fact that we tend to have more time on average in our lives, but for some reason they're lacking motivation. How do we get engaged? How do we sort of deal with that angst that we gotta have in that?
So, you know, I guess I divide it into two separate answers, right? One is engagement, and the other one is anxiety or angst. I'll start with engagement and maybe hand it off to Alan. You know, one of the clearest routes we have to engagement is use of character strengths. When we employ them, you know, so one exercise, for example, is using your character strength in a new way every day, right? If it is appreciation of beauty and mastery, and someone here, I missed it, I saw it before in the Q&A, but it was talking about creativity. If it's that, then if it means taking a little time every day if it's music, to really listen to a piece of music that you love, or to look at visual art that you love. For some people, it's nature, to really sit and just take a moment with nature. That is going to allow us to become engaged. If it is something like bravery, as Alan mentioned, what are some things you can do that, is it reaching out to folks that you haven't in some time, asking questions that are challenging questions to ask? So, one path to engagement is that. The idea of engagement or flow, and we talk about flow, sort of, if people know that term, some people think about it's getting into the zone. Officially, it's when the level of challenge meets the level of skill, right? So if I am if I'm a violin player and I've been playing for 13, 14, 20 years, and you give me Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, I'm gonna get bored really quickly, right? But I've been playing for 2 or 3 years and you give me Paganini Concerto, I'm gonna get overwhelmed. But you want to find that right sweet spot. What's the place that's just gonna challenge me, but also engage me? And that's when you get into the zone. So for folks out there who are looking to become engaged, how do you challenge yourself? If you're writing, you're trying to write the great American novel, or you just trying to write a couple of pages that you find quite beautiful? What's the right challenge for you? I think that's a big opportunity when it comes to engagement, because when you find the right balance, that's when you get locked into that zone and into flow. And then there's anxiety.
I think I've been thinking about what Dan was saying about engagement as you've been going, and also looking at the micro play times question that someone asked. And play is engagement and flow quite often. And the question is, an expression I've always liked: can you get the quality without the quantity? So I think there can be micro play times, but the question is, how micro can they be? And figuring that out and scheduling them in during the day can be a really wonderful thing. I've definitely been looking for chunks of time, but I make it a minimum of 15 minutes with my kids. So for a while I was like, oh, I'll steal down, I'll have 5 minutes with the kids. And it would sort of leave, I'd say, both of us feeling unsatisfied by the experience. And figuring out how much time you need to experience flow and engagement is, I think, very important. If you take my meditation practice, I used to try 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day. I figured out I need about 20 minutes a day if I'm going to be a nice person. That's what I need to meditate. And sometimes I get a little less, but most of the time, that's what I go for. I like the idea of micro playtime, both for you and your kid, but figuring out how little that has to be, I think, is particularly important. The question about anxiety, there have been a bunch of questions about anxiety, and some of them are broader than others. I've been feeling really anxious when I think about going back to the real world once the lockdown is over. Any suggestions? Well, which part of going back to the real world? I don't, if it's the traveling on the subway, or is it maybe even just being around people? A lot of my people that I work with who have a lot of social anxiety, they still have social anxiety on Zoom. It didn't go away. It's been really hard for them. I have a couple kids who are school avoidant. They've been thrilled. This has been the best COVID-19 experience ever. They're like, I've always not wanted to go to school, and now no one goes to school. But they've also avoided the Zoom calls too. It's been really interesting. I've been like, you finally got what you want. All you have to do is log on. And they're like, no, I don't want to do it. Anxiety, I feel different about this after speaking with Jonathan Fields about putting such a negative pejorative on the word uncertainty. In general, we say uncertainty is underneath a lot of anxiety. Uncertainty can also be a wonderful thing, just to let you know. It can be a moment of great opportunity and thinking about things differently. But for many of us, having some degree of control, even when we don't really have control, is very important. And figuring out what you can control and what you can't control, and learning how to live with that. I mean, that is the heart of what so much of therapy is about with anxiety, or when you're dealing with trauma, which is kind of like, anxiety to the 10th degree, you're helping people realize we live in a fragile, vulnerable world, and yet we can all still go on as long as we go on together, as long as we're really connected. By the way, I just spit. I literally had a moment where I was like, I'm so sorry for spitting on all of you. But, for me, dealing with my anxiety right now, so much about humor. It's been humor, and actually going back to engagement, Dan and I have talked about this a lot. Music. I've really gone deep into music, which is an activity of engagement, I'd say. Making time for music every day. I've been singing a lot. If you came on the call at the very beginning, I was singing.
So the question for folks out there would be, what do you find engaging? Like if you were to just think about it each day, even if it's just for a few minutes, what is it that engages you? Can you do more of that? If Alan's singing, what is it for you? And so being able to track that, it's another intervention that we share in the class, but basically tracking what makes your days good. In this case, it could be, what do you find engaging? And you may find it, you may be surprised both by what it is and also the opportunities that you have to be able to explore that.
I think that, thank you for that. I need to actually take a lot of that advice in my own life right now. And I think that what might be even so challenging about some of that, and to what one of the attendees mentioned, the boundaries around time are so kind of fractured now and so hard to determine. And I know that I sometimes feel some guilt or anxiety about doing something that's enjoyable because I don't know if I've done enough work, because there's no one to kind of clock me out, I guess. So what does it look like to sort of set up those effective boundaries so that when we do engage in those more meaningful or engaging activities, we can kind of enjoy them to the fullest extent?
Well, it's interesting that you asked that, and it's also interesting that the next question that came in right after it is about the urge to feel productive all the time.
Right.
This may be the number one question I've gotten from folks I work with is, is it okay if I slack off? I'm like, well, what does slacking off look like? Well, I might be binge watching things more often, or I'm like listening to music like more often than I might have, or I find myself like I sleep like a whole 7 or 8 hours, instead of like getting up super early and getting to it, and and I think one of the most wonderful things, I think that look, we are not blind optimists, but when we look at silver linings and back to the question of being anxious about what comes afterwards, I think the flip side of that is, I have yet to talk to anybody in any of my, whether it's friends or family or clients, who have said, I cannot wait to go back to what it was like before so I can do exactly what I was doing, exactly like I was doing it before. To a person. And it's interesting because there was 1 week early in the pandemic with 3 people I talked to who were very productive people. They're sort of excessively sort of went, I'm feeling totally lost, or my brain is shut down, 80% of my brain is shut down. They've come back and they've said, I actually am feeling much more comfortable with just letting some time slip by, with reading a book or watching TV or watching a movie or two. And I think for a lot of folks, they're finding balance right now. One of the calls I was on with a client that had these 15 folks, they were enormously accomplished. And so many of them have said, I said on the call, I want the way I see my future now is different. I still want to do what I'm doing, but I see there's some things that are important to me. Spending time with my kids, like Alan was saying, so even if it's a little more time with my kids, letting myself not constantly have to achieve. So I would say yes. My answer to that question is really like, yeah, it's totally fine to take some more time for yourself and know that that's okay. And it's actually probably really good for you. You might think about how you want to incorporate that in the future, because that is a productive way and a way of using it.
I'll throw in one other thing. The idea of I've made some boundaries for myself, and I've tried to make them fairly irreversible decisions, a topic we talk about in the class. Just say, this is a rule. I have drawn from my Jewish heritage, and I have said from Friday night to Saturday night is electronic free. I really keep it, except for a Zoom call with my mom, which I consider a worthwhile thing. They're electronic free. For those of you with kids, my kids were like, what? And then they loved it. They found that they fought so much less. It really worked. And so now Saturday night we watch a movie, and then Sunday is electronic free till 3 p.m. So you got to experiment. This is a time of experiment. And just like Dan said, out of these experiments, of experimenting on ourselves, I think we're going to find some things that we'd all like to do differently when we return to the life that we knew better.
You know, when asking about the boundaries, we're working on average about 2 hours longer each day since the pandemic, since confinement began, because of the boundaries we don't set. So part of it is being able to feel more comfortable and say, I'm going to stop at X p.m. And you might think you can keep going. Guess what? You can, because there isn't I'm going to get up now and walk out the door and get in the subway or whatever it might be. So being able to set that, it can be really helpful, like most things, to do it with a friend. So whether you've told your kid, I will see you at 5:30, or you've told your friends, we will have cocktails on Zoom at 5:30, or whatever it might be, or, you set up I'm going to work out at 5:30 and I'm going to catch that online class, whatever it is. Like when we set that, it's helpful because it does bleed into others. And someone had asked, the question disappeared, which is too bad. But let me see if I can find it again. There was another one that was related. I think that was so important. I'm sorry. I've lost it now, and I've forgotten it now. Oh, it was about bad news. By the way, yes, consuming too much bad news can have a really detrimental effect on your well-being. So, my blanket, look, some people consume far more news than others, and some people deal with it in different ways than others. But if someone's asking that question, it's probably because they're thinking, I'm not doing necessarily as well as I'd like to, and maybe I'm consuming too much bad news. For those folks, I simply say, being informed is important, but immersing 175% into every little nook and cranny might not be for everybody. To know what keeps you safe, to know what's happening out in the world is important. Are you spending hours on your news feed? Might not be so good. And you look at the research of people who read the news, especially as the news has gotten increasingly negative over the past 20 years, because negative is attractive. People want to see that. Those people who digest more news tend to have lower well-being. So to limit that is important. Yeah.
Someone just said sleep.
Yeah. Please
talk about sleep. I know of no one who has said to me, God, I'm sleeping so much better now. I think people are.
And can I add to that question a little bit?
Sure.
I think in addition to sleep, what sort of I've found to be kind of just profoundly difficult is engaging with the body in general, as a holistic experience. So not just sleep, but also diet has been strained for people. Movement has been hard for people as well.
Yeah.
So within that context of sleep, can you talk around all that? Yeah.
I think that the four most basic lack of good sleep education is actually a health challenge that most people in the country face. And that's why Dan and I spend an entire class on sleep. And there is actually at NYU an entire course on sleep. At Stanford, it is the most popular course at Stanford. Was a class just on sleep, filling the room with hundreds of people. But the four things I usually try to leave people with are the four components. Quantity, you have to have the quantity. And I think a lot of people have actually been doing better with the quantity. But you also need, once you have the quantity, you need the quality, the consistency, which has been harder for people.
UNCs, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Consistency. And I was like, quality, quantity. I was like, no, those are cues.
No, I'm just loving it.
And the last one is, for me at least, the most challenging right now is state of mind. So all of us naturally come out of our sleep about 4 times every night. We go into our deep sleep and we come up to our lighter sleep and we have our REM dreaming. If we're really anxious about something and we come up to that light sleep and we have something to do the next day, we pop out of it. We go, oh, geez, I've got that work I need to do. And so something that's really changed my life is when I'm setting my goals for the day, my little A's, I'm often thinking, what are the little A's that I'm going to do so that when I go to sleep tonight, I'm not going to feel too anxious or uncertain. I'm going to have a good state of mind. That we should sleep so we can have a good day. And we need to have the right kind of good day so we can have a good night of sleep. Dan?
No, I agree. And, to build on what Shaquille was asking before, I will say, I think there are a fair amount of folks out there who are getting much better sleep right now. And for them it is, and not to push back too hard on you there, Alan, but, and for them it's about, and some of them are really savoring it. They're like, I feel much better this way, and some aren't. And they're like, I'm sleeping too much. Well, maybe it's just you weren't sleeping enough before, and so to be able to savor that and go, my self-regulation is better now. My willpower is higher now. These are things that are connected to sleep. My ability to deal with challenges are better now. As Alan mentioned before, with the well-being, it often gives us a leg up when it comes to dealing with the challenges. Sometimes sleep is really good. Shaquille, you brought up exercise, and we teach exercise and nutrition in the class. Exercise, its effect on our body, is profoundly important. And our ability to process and to have well-being. Alan and I often talk about the dominoes. What comes first? Is it sleep, nutrition, or exercise? For Alan, it's been sleep for him for a long time. For me, it's been exercise. If I don't exercise, I'll come home and my wife's like, you should go to the gym. And I'm like, why? And then I come back, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. You're totally right. I need to go work out. So if I don't get that in somehow, even if it's here in the living room doing something, interacting with the computer, with the online program, then I'm not very good at it. And I think nutrition is wonderful because it offers us an opportunity, not just to eat, but to eat with other people. And that's one of the things too. We can cook, or we don't cook. We can savor. If we don't savor the food, we can savor time with others. Nutrition offers us a lot of different opportunities we don't necessarily think of as opportunities for well-being. So all three of those things to be kept in mind, and just to take, even if it's as simple as a scale of 1 to 10, how am I doing? I'm sleeping on a 3. Okay, what would a 4 look like? It would look like me going to sleep a little early. Okay, so I lower the lights a little earlier. I stop watching TV or computer or any screen time 45 minutes to an hour before I go to bed. Like, what's one thing I could do to boost myself up a little bit, and take it from there, as opposed to I must have a perfect night of sleep, right?
Right.
That's it with the others, and then there are the other questions too about like the basics, books and pop culture and that kind of stuff too. Like, yeah, I'm sorry, but Alan, you want to say something more about it?
Well, somebody just asked a really powerful question, and it's been on my mind throughout this whole conversation. It's on my mind on a daily basis, and the idea, Obama brought it up very well in his graduation speech the other day. The idea of COVID-19 has laid bare the discrepancy of income, race, and healthcare, and that discrepancy will include the ability of people to engage with themselves and with their well-being. That there are so many people with such unbelievable challenges right now. And I think Dan and I won't speak for Dan, although maybe a little bit, but better yet, I'll just be interested in your reaction. I think one of the points in a lot of the study of well-being is that we have the ability to focus on our well-being even during unbelievably difficult times. There is a limit to that, but many people have a greater ability to focus on it than they think. Sort of like, that's how I explain meditation. Meditation is not for everybody. There are probably many more people who could benefit from learning how to breathe deeply and rhythmically, and what that does for your nervous system, than think they can. But I'm still saying it's not for everybody. And I think I am terribly distraught about the discrepancy that's occurring right now, and that will only grow after this as we deal with the repercussions. And that's something else I'm thinking about, and what I'm going to be doing with my life, and how are we all going to not just deal with this, but how are we going to deal with the next one after this? What do you think, Dan? Or Shaquille? Or Carolyn?
Sure. I mean, I can talk a little. I think that I think, and I love that question as well personally, because I think that it is one of the opportunities I think that we all have is sort of trying to really notice the people around us that are really, I think, dealing with these things. Because I think that abstractly we can tell that this is a discrepancy, in access and in injustice and such things. But I think bringing it down to the concrete level of who do I know, who's in my community, who's in my circles, and how can I be present and connected to those people. I think that people tend to be really pretty attuned to their needs in a lot of ways sometimes, and can let you know, like, if what they need relationally and what they might need in other aspects as well. And yeah, trying to bring it down as much to the concrete person to person connection. And then maybe thinking after that about like the larger scope of things personally.
Yeah. I feel it seems to come down to what's available to us in a way. I mean, I think that question was not only one of the question was beautifully phrased too. Yes, we're privileged in many, many ways. And so how do you take that privilege and make the world a better place? It's one of the key questions we know when it comes to increasing meaning. Research on meaning, when people ponder or discuss or journal on the question, how do I help make the world a better place? Or how does the work that I do help make the world a better place? Or how can I make the world, how can I help other people? Our levels of meaning tend to rise. So Alan, for you, you have certain ways that you are able to practice, in part because of your role as a doctor. Mr. Keel, because of your community and what it is you're able to do. There was a really interesting article yesterday in the Times about where New Yorkers have gone, right? Like, because they and based on postal addresses and the forwarding. And they've gone to Miami, and this group has gone to LA, and the group who lives on Upper East Side goes wherever they go, right? But I thought, and it's interesting just to see it was very technical. There was a really beautiful part of that article, and it was at the very end. It was the last 3 paragraphs, I remember, where they spoke to a guy who, gosh, I can't remember what he does. Whatever he does keeps him here, and he travels a bit as a kind of stand-up comedian. He lives in the Bronx. His whole family's in the Bronx. He says as soon as he heard that what was happening, and he was called back to New York, he came back, and what he does every day is he basically stays in touch with his 12 family members who live nearby. He gets them what they need. He goes out and finds for them. He said, my father was a cab, if I remember, my father was a cab driver, and my mother, we're New Yorkers. He said, when something happens in New York, I was here in the 80s for the hurricane. I was here for 9/11. I'm here now. But for many New Yorkers, what they can do best is be in New York and help other people around them. And so for him to do that was really beautiful, to know he doesn't have the reach to go to a hospital and do what he does. And his community is different than your community. I feel really fortunate to be able to have the platform of the Happiest Hour to bring experts to people so that those people can ask questions. Like, that's what I can do right now. That's my area of expertise, is reaching out to contacts and friends who are brilliant at what they do when it comes to well-being and challenges like stress, and bring them to a public forum where people can ask them questions. It might be reaching out to the neighbor down the hall, but whatever it is for you, to use your strength that way. And for Carolyn to sign up for the hotline that she's working with. What can you do? It doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be your life's work. It doesn't have to be all consuming, but knowing you're doing something, to bring your strengths, to bring your skills to the community, to help improve the community and the world. That's what we're talking about.
Great. Thank you both so much. I think, and we're winding down towards the end now. I was wondering if you could talk for maybe 20 to 30 seconds really quickly for each of you on what's giving you hope right now. What sort of, as you look towards the future, what's hopeful?
Go for it, Alan. You want to take it?
I think the thing that is bringing me hope is the amazing connectedness you see, is the fact that New York tough, that we have overcome it. Bellevue Hospital, NYU Hospital, they are emptying out, and we've overcome it, and at great loss and great sacrifice. And there may very well be a second wave, but we overcame this wave, and we'll overcome that wave. And resilience comes from knowing you can overcome things, and we can, and we will.
And speaking of overcoming, by the way, someone just asked that question of where can you catch Happiest Hour? It's Wednesdays at 5. If you go to www.happiesthour.org, there's registration there. It's free. Although we do encourage a $5 donation to No Kid Hungry, which is a not-for-profit we've affiliated ourselves with. Another thing that brings us meaning, but Yeah, I don't know, Carolyn, if you want to put it in there, but happiesthour.org.
Slide.
Thank you.
But
You
yeah.
know, hope for me, you know, it's a great question. There's so many ways to answer that. I guess what strikes me right now is that we've been in this situation for the last 2.5 months, and for many of us, we're okay. Like, it's frustrating, it's challenging, it's scary, and it can be stressful, and yet many of us are okay, you know. And for those of us who have gone through it, I was talking to a friend this morning who had it. He's come out the other side. Not everyone's going to, clearly, but we've done this long, and we're getting closer to a place where we'll be able to manage it. We've also gotten better at being where we are inside, taking our little walks with our masks, and being able to sort of find a way to live a life that, you know, if you would have asked 3 months ago, is it possible to be happy in any way? You've been like, no way. But now I'm like, am I looking forward to getting back to the good things I can't do now? Of course. But you know what? I'm actually okay, and my family's okay. And so that's what gives me hope, is knowing we can make this work for an extended period of time, and we'll get there.
Awesome. Thank you. And that's all the time we have. So we've got our closing slide right there with some links to catch up with Dan and Alan some more. So I just want to thank everyone for your beautiful questions. Dan, Alan, and Shaquille, of course, thank you again for being here with us. You guys actually mentioned Jonathan Haidt, and that's an example of someone. We also had a 5 questions with Jonathan Haidt on NYU Alumni Relations site. So that recording is already up there.
Yeah.
Sorry?
It's great. I watched it last week. It was wonderful.
Oh yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
So, and as a friendly reminder, we'll be posting this webinar online with closed captions in a few days. And you can check out other NYU Alumni Association sponsored talks online as well. You also get an email survey later today. We welcome your feedback so we can improve our programs moving forward. And we invite everyone to stay connected with the NYU Alumni Association and with Dan and Alan on our websites and social media platforms, which are listed on this page. And we also invite you to consider making a gift to the NYU Emergency Relief Fund for students facing financial challenges during the COVID-19 crisis. So you can do that on the NYU website at nyu.edu/giving. So thank you all for joining us. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, NYU.
Yeah,
Take care.
thank you so much.
Take care.